Have you ever laid beside the person you love and felt an ocean stretching between you? The voice that once warmed you now sounds distant. The eyes that once burned with light no longer turn your way. Most men realize it too late, when distance hardens into silence and silence fractures into separation. Infidelity doesn't start with a kiss, it starts with absence. With conversations that shrink, with priorities where your name disappears. By the time you wake to it, the relationship is already a shadow of what it was. Today, we'll confront 4 simple but dangerous phrases, signals that, if ignored, will cost you peace, dignity, and perhaps your future. Not accusation, but warning. Not anger, but clarity. Signal 1. He's just a friend. On the surface, the phrase feels harmless, soft, almost dismissive. It's said with a smile, maybe even a laugh, as if to soothe your doubts before they have a chance to take root. But pause for a moment. If someone truly is just a friend, why the need for reassurance? Why the quick defense? Why the repetition of those words like a shield? The harder she works to convince you there's nothing to worry about, the more likely it is that something deeper is at play. This is where most men make their mistake. They silence their instincts. They tell themselves they're being paranoid, insecure, unfair. They bury what they feel in the name of trust. But trust isn't about ignoring what unsettles you. It's about truth being honored without needing constant explanation. When truth is real, it doesn't need marketing. It doesn't need rehearsed lines. It simply exists. Watch closely and you'll start to notice the patterns. His name begins to appear more often, dropped casually into conversation. She laughs harder when she's looking at her phone, and you don't need to ask who's on the other end. Stories about her day always seem to circle back to him, as if he's become the permanent supporting character in her narrative. Sometimes, she even encourages you to meet him. "See," she says, smiling, "he's harmless." But the discomfort doesn't fade. It grows. Because deep down you recognize that this connection is being guarded, even prioritized, in ways your own bond is not. This doesn't always mean betrayal. Not every friendship is a doorway to infidelity, but it does reveal a shift. Emotional energy is finite, and when more of it flows toward another man than toward you, balance is lost. The relationship is no longer whole. Something has quietly tipped, and while she may not admit it, you can feel it. A woman who truly loves you will guard your sense of safety. She will not hold on to relationships that make you feel disposable. She won't defend another man's presence in her life more fiercely than she defends your trust. When she does, when "just a friend" is said with more urgency than "I love you," you should not dismiss that as coincidence. You should see it for what it is, a sign that emotional loyalty is being divided, and divided love is weakened love. The danger here is subtle. It's not about physical lines being crossed, but emotional ones. Texts that come too often, jokes you're not part of, secrets that find their way into someone else's ear instead of yours. Slowly, she begins sharing parts of herself with him, the frustrations, the private doubts, even the pieces of your relationship that once belonged only to the two of you. This is not innocent. This is not neutral. This is emotional intimacy being shifted, one message, one laugh, one late-night conversation at a time. And here's the truth no one wants to face. When she says, "He's just a friend," it isn't always a lie, but it's rarely the whole story. That phrase is often the opening note of a song already written in her head. A song that ends with you standing on the outside, wondering how long she had been rehearsing her departure while defending the presence of another man. Trust your instincts. They are rarely wrong. When she works harder to preserve another man's place in her life than she does to preserve your peace, it is not friendship you are competing with. It is something unspoken and perhaps already underway. Signal 2. Gaslighting and dodging responsibility. It often begins in a moment so small you almost dismiss it. A story that doesn't quite line up. A message on her phone that lingers a second too long before she swipes it away. Something feels off, so you ask. You're not aggressive, you're not accusing, you're just looking for clarity. But instead of clarity, you're hit with deflection. You're being paranoid. You're overreacting. Suddenly, the focus is no longer on what she did, but on the fact that you even asked. And in the blink of an eye, you've gone from the one searching for truth to the one standing trial. This is not miscommunication. It is strategy. A psychological maneuver as old as human relationships. When someone refuses to answer the question and instead makes you doubt yourself, they're not clarifying, they're controlling. By shifting the spotlight from their behavior to your reaction, they avoid accountability. And worse, they plant seeds of guilt inside you for daring to notice. Sometimes it escalates. She might project back onto you. Why would you even think that unless you're hiding something yourself? Now, not only are you wrong for asking, you're suspect by default. It's a clever move. It knocks you off balance while keeping her beyond reach. You walk away from the conversation not with answers, but with doubt about her, about the situation, and worst of all, about yourself. This is the essence of gaslighting. It's rarely explosive. More often, it's subtle, quiet, calculated. It rewrites the story so that you no longer trust the signals you receive from your own life. One day, she says she was out with girlfriends, but the next day, someone mentions a guy being there. You raise the question, and she waves it off. You're reading too much into it. But your gut knows better. Your intuition is not an enemy. It is your ally. The body notices before the brain rationalizes. A hesitation in her voice, a shift in her eyes, an inconsistency in her story. These things matter. They are whispers of the truth, and yet gaslighting teaches you to ignore them, to override the alarms sounding in your chest. The danger here isn't just dishonesty, it's erosion. Slowly, you stop trusting yourself. You begin to believe the problem isn't what you saw or heard, but your own ability to perceive reality. You shrink, you second guess, and with each doubt you swallow, you hand over more of your power. But clarity begins with this realization. If your spirit feels unsettled, it is not without reason. If your peace keeps being disturbed, that is evidence enough. You don't need every piece of proof lined up perfectly. You don't need to catch someone red-handed to validate what you feel in your bones. Gaslighting thrives when you abandon your own judgment. It dies the moment you stand by it. A man who trusts his instincts cannot be controlled by someone else's narrative. He knows what he knows, even when another voice insists otherwise. That's not insecurity. That's strength. That's clarity. Signal 3. I need space. At first, the phrase sounds noble, mature, even admirable. Who doesn't need space to breathe, to think, to grow? It's framed as self-awareness, as though she's pressing pause, not out of distance, but out of care. But too often, those words don't mark a pause at all. They mark the beginning of an ending. Space is rarely empty. When someone asks for it, it's often because that space is already being filled. by another person, by a new interest, by a life she's curious to test without you in it. It isn't a request for healing, it's an experiment in absence. You can see the signs long before the words leave her mouth. The messages grow shorter. The voice on the other end of the line loses warmth. What was once laughter and long conversations becomes practical exchanges, stripped of intimacy. The physical closeness fades, not because of stress or fatigue, but because desire itself has dimmed. And somewhere in the background, a new name begins to surface, a new presence, quietly making its way into her orbit. This is where so many men falter. They panic, they chase, they try to prove themselves worthy of staying. They plead, promise, and negotiate for love that has already begun to walk away. But the more you reach, the further she pulls back. The more you give, the less she values what is in her hands. Chasing someone who is already slipping away doesn't close the gap, it widens it. The strongest response isn't anger. It isn't begging. It isn't offering more of yourself to someone who's already asked for less. The strongest response is restraint. You honor the request completely. You step back, not out of defeat, but out of dignity. You allow her to use that space however she intends, and in doing so, you protect your center. Because space reveals intent. If she uses that distance to reflect, to heal, to return with clarity, then the relationship may have life left in it. But if she fills it with someone else, with distractions, with a future that excludes you, then the truth was always there. It was not in her words, but in the emptiness she created. And here's the paradox. The moment you refuse to chase, you regain your power. You're no longer at the mercy of her indecision. You're no longer strung along by the hope that she'll come back. Instead, you stand in silence, anchored, while she drifts. And when she finally looks back, she won't see the desperate man she expected. She'll see someone she underestimated, someone who knew when to stop giving to a person who had already let go. That's not weakness. That's not passivity. That's strength. To step away when someone pulls back is to honor yourself. It is to say, my worth is not defined by how tightly I hold on to someone else, but by how firmly I hold on to myself. Signal 4. You deserve someone better. At first, it sounds like kindness, a compliment wrapped in tenderness. The words are delivered softly, with a sigh, maybe even with a trace of regret in her eyes. To the untrained ear, it feels noble, like she's thinking of you, putting your best interests ahead of her own. But listen closer. That phrase is not about you. It is her cleanest exit strategy. By the time those words reach your ears, she is already gone. Maybe not physically. She might still sit across the table, still share your bed, but her spirit has left. The warmth in her eyes has cooled. Her voice carries distance instead of devotion. The touches that once lingered are now habits, performed out of routine rather than desire. And instead of admitting the truth, I don't love you anymore, or I've found someone else, she cloaks it in virtue. She gives you a parting gift, the illusion that she's leaving for your sake. But make no mistake, you deserve better is not about your worth. It is about her guilt. It allows her to walk away with her conscience intact, hands clean, story polished. You become the good man who simply needed a better fit, while she becomes the selfless woman who let you go. In reality, it is not generosity. It is avoidance. It is her way of slipping out of responsibility without facing the harder, uglier truth. This is where men often falter. They hear the words and rush to argue. No, you're what I want. We can fix this. "I'll do better." They think the phrase is an invitation to fight for love. But it isn't. It's a curtain call. The performance is over, and no amount of pleading will bring the scene back to life. Every promise you make, every gesture of reassurance, only delays what is already decided. Strength in this moment does not look like resistance. It looks like acceptance. Not because you weren't good enough, but because you were wise enough to see through the disguise. Real love doesn't need to wear a mask of sacrifice. Real love doesn't frame abandonment as a gift. When she tells you that you deserve better, she is not elevating you. She is excusing herself. So the question becomes, will you allow yourself to be soothed by the illusion, or will you face the reality head-on? To accept her words without protest is not weakness. It is dignity. It is the refusal to beg for a heart that has already closed. It is the recognition that a woman who truly valued you would not choose to leave under the guise of compassion. She would stay and fight, uncomfortable as it might be. There is an old truth worth remembering. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. When she says, "You deserve better," believe her, not in the sense that you weren't enough, but in the sense that she no longer wishes to be there. And then let her go, because you do deserve better. Not better than her, but better than holding on to a love that already ended, dressed up as mercy. Closing. Infidelity is rarely a sudden act. It's almost never a moment of impulse. It begins as a series of small shifts, subtle phrases, slight changes in tone, tiny reordering of priorities. "He's just a friend." "You're being paranoid." "I need space." "You deserve better." These aren't just words. They are coordinates pointing toward fracture. What hurts most isn't the phrases themselves, but the way men betray their own instincts. They convince themselves to trust what their heart already knows is false. They endure, they explain, they wait, until one day they realize they've lost not just her, but themselves in the process. Your job is not to persuade someone to stay. Love is not a one-sided negotiation. A woman who still loves you will protect the bond with you, not fight against it. And if she chooses to let go, remember, letting her walk isn't weakness. It is strength. It is dignity. It is the decision to keep your peace, your self-respect, your future intact. There's a truth worth holding on to. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. A man of value doesn't need anyone to tell him he deserves more. He knows it already by the way he carries himself and by the way he refuses to settle for half-hearted love.